In 2008, Zimbabwe issued a $100 trillion bill. Not $100 billion, $100 trillion. And it couldn't even buy you a loaf of bread. That same year, a teacher in Zimbabwe needed a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy groceries for 1 week. But by the time she got to the store, the prices had already doubled. Her entire monthly salary, paid that very morning, was completely worthless by evening. This isn't some tale from ancient history. It's not a theoretical economic scenario from a textbook. This happened just over 15 years ago in a modern country. It's happened more than 30 times in the last century alone. Currency death is real, it's predictable, and the warning signs look eerily similar to what's happening in several countries right now. So let's look at what actually happens when a currency dies, and why you absolutely need to recognize the pattern. Currency death doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, grinding collapse that accelerates in stages. And the first stage looks almost completely normal. It starts with a government that can't balance its budget. Maybe there was a war, a recession, or expensive social programs. Whatever the reason, the government is spending way more than it collects in taxes. At first, they just borrow money to cover the gap. They issue bonds, take loans from other countries, and promise they'll pay it all back when the economy improves. This phase can last for years, even decades. Everything seems manageable. But eventually, the debt becomes too large. Credit rating agencies start downgrading the country. The interest rates on new loans get higher and higher. Foreign investors stop buying the government's bonds. The government reaches a critical moment. They can either slash spending dramatically, raise taxes significantly, or find another way to pay their bills. Almost every government in this situation chooses that third option. They print money. And this is where the early stage truly begins. At first, it's just a little extra money creation. They give it fancy names like quantitative easing or economic stimulus. They'll have economists on TV explaining why this time it's different, why modern monetary theory means the old rules don't apply. Inflation ticks up slightly, maybe from 2% to 4%, then to 7%. People notice prices are rising, but it's not catastrophic yet. Salaries adjust a little bit, life goes on. This is the warning phase, and most people ignore it because it's just not painful enough to make them change their behavior. Then something breaks. Maybe it's a political crisis, a natural disaster, or maybe the country's reserves of foreign currency simply run out. Whatever the trigger, the money printing suddenly accelerates. The government needs more money to cover its growing deficit. But now, inflation is making that deficit even bigger because everything costs more. So they print more money to cover the higher costs, which causes more inflation, which requires more printing. It's a vicious feedback loop with no exit. This is when people start to notice that something is deeply wrong. Inflation jumps from 7% to 15%, then 30%, then 50%. Prices are changing weekly, then daily. A salary that seemed perfectly fine 6 months ago now can't even cover basic expenses. People begin losing faith in the currency. This is the critical psychological shift. They start spending their money immediately instead of saving it because they know it will be worth less tomorrow. This increased velocity of money makes inflation even worse. Businesses start refusing to accept the local currency or demand payment in foreign currencies like US dollars. A black market for foreign currency explodes. The official exchange rate becomes completely meaningless because nobody actually uses it. Suddenly, there are two economies, the fake official one and the real black market one. In Zimbabwe, by 2008, the official inflation rate was 231 million%. But that's just a meaningless number. What it meant in practice was that a chicken that cost 10 Zimbabwe dollars in the morning cost 20 by the afternoon. Money had stopped functioning as money. Employers started paying workers twice a day so they could run to the store and buy food before prices rose again. People were carrying cash in plastic bags and wheelbarrows. A single egg could cost billions of dollars. The currency had become less valuable than toilet paper because at least you could use the toilet paper. The final stage is total collapse, and it happens faster than anyone expects. At a certain point, people simply stop accepting the currency entirely. It doesn't matter if the government prints trillion-dollar bills. Nobody wants them. The currency has crossed the line from being weak to being worthless. When this happens, the economy doesn't just shrink, it breaks. Imagine going to work and your boss pays you in monopoly money. Would you show up tomorrow? Of course not. So, workers stop working. Factories shut down. Supply chains collapse. Hospitals can't pay their staff. The police and military don't get paid, so they abandon their posts or turn to corruption and looting just to survive. This is when you see those shocking images of people burning stacks of currency for heat, because it's literally cheaper than firewood. When you see million-dollar bills littering the streets like trash, when store shelves are empty, not because there's no food in the country, but because farmers won't sell their crops for worthless paper. When poverty explodes. Savings accounts that represented a lifetime of work become worthless overnight. Pensions disappear. The middle class is completely obliterated. Anyone who held their wealth in the national currency loses everything. In Zimbabwe, life expectancy plummeted. Cholera outbreaks occurred because sanitation systems collapsed. 3 million people fled the country as refugees. The country's GDP fell by 50%. It was a full-blown economic apocalypse. And here's the truly devastating part. This suffering is completely avoidable. Currency death is a policy choice. It happens because governments choose to print money rather than make hard fiscal decisions, every single time. So what happens after a currency dies? How does a country even begin to rebuild? The solution is always the same. Abandon the dead currency and adopt something people actually trust. Usually, this means using a foreign currency. Zimbabwe eventually abandoned the Zimbabwe dollar entirely and started using US dollars in the South African rand. Ecuador uses the US dollar. El Salvador recently added Bitcoin alongside the dollar. But adopting a foreign currency comes with its own set of problems. You lose control of your own monetary policy. You can't print your way out of a problem anymore, which sounds good until a real crisis hits and you have no flexibility. You're completely at the mercy of another country's economic decisions. The social and political scars can last for generations. An entire generation in Zimbabwe grew up watching their parents' life savings become worthless. They watched their government lie about inflation numbers while prices quintupled every week. They learned that institutions can't be trusted and that official numbers are just propaganda. That kind of trauma doesn't heal quickly. Venezuela is going through this right now. Lebanon. Argentina is on its 5th attempt to stabilize its currency in just 40 years. Turkey is experiencing over 70% inflation and showing all the early signs of a currency crisis. The pattern is always the same. Government overspending, debt accumulation, money printing, inflation, acceleration, collapse. Then, adoption of a foreign currency or a hard asset. The names change, the decade changes, the pattern never does. So how do you know when a currency is in danger? What are the warning signs to look for? First, rapidly increasing money supply combined with government deficits that aren't shrinking. If the amount of money being created is growing way faster than the economy itself, trouble is on the horizon. Second, rising inflation that government officials deny or downplay. When they start changing how they calculate inflation to make the numbers look better, that's a huge red flag. Third, capital controls. When the government starts limiting how much foreign currency you can buy or restricts you from sending money abroad, they are trying to trap wealth inside a sinking ship. Fourth, the black market exchange rate diverges significantly from the official rate. When people on the street are willing to pay double the official rate for $1, it tells you the official rate is pure fiction. And fifth, shortages of basic goods, even though people have money. When store shelves are empty, not because people can't afford things, but because producers won't accept the currency, it's over. If you see 3 or more of these signs in your country, the currency is in serious danger. Currency death has happened over 30 times in the last 100 years. It's not rare. It's not ancient history. It's a recurring pattern that destroys wealth and lives. The warning signs are visible years before the final collapse, but most people ignore them until it's far too late. Don't be most people. If this changed how you see your own currency, subscribe. I cover the economic patterns that repeat throughout history so you can see what's coming. Let me know in the comments, what country do you think is most at risk right now? Thanks for watching. Stay aware and protect yourself.